This is Boston Lanka News, bringing you news, views, and entertainment from Boston and USA. I'm Vayoni Dimel. Kosala Tantula, who resides in McLean, Virginia, has over 40 years of experience in public accounting and banking in both United Kingdom and United States. During the tsunami, he coordinated the work of the foreign relief teams. He has been involved with the activities of the Sri Lankan community in Washington, D.C. and had served as the treasurer of the Sri Lankan Association of Washington, D.C. He was a key member of the now defunct Association for Peace in Sri Lanka that played a major role in enlightening the United States government about the other side of the story while combating the vast propaganda machinery of the LTTE. Kosala, you have written in a recent article that Sri Lanka has lost credibility in the international community around the world due to the lack of coherently developed foreign policy to advance the fundamental continuing interests of the nation across the world community. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. Let me first and foremost thank you for inviting me for your program, Vyoni. Now, talking about coherent foreign policy, I don't think Sri Lanka has had a coherent policy since the beginning of independence. Now, it's no secret that Sri Lanka now has lost twice in Geneva, and one can understand to a certain point the first loss, but a second loss is difficult to comprehend. And also, going back, Sri Lanka initially had a pro-Western foreign policy, and then it went to the other side, the other extreme in the 60s towards a pro-Soviet policy, and then in the 70s it switched back, and now it has gone to a very extreme nationalistic foreign policy, which shows as if it's a bit of a paranoid, lopsided policy. Now, if Sri Lanka is to follow its true policy of non-alignment, I think Sri Lanka should not take any side.
So you think Sri Lankan foreign policy going in the wrong direction? Tell us a few specifics about that.
Now it's very obvious that Sri Lanka is following an anti-Western policy. That is not a very good policy to follow, considering that Sri Lanka is still dependent on Western support. Now, Sri Lanka has had a very illogical foreign policy. Either it has to follow the non-aligned policy, which is like the middle path, and continue it, or alternatively, it has to be another policy which is coherent. Unfortunately, Sri Lanka has not had any policy like that, except I think during the time of Mr. Kadirgama, I think he tried to bring some rationality to the policy, as far as I know. But not only the policy, even the execution of the policy has not been very rational. Now, for example, the controlled state media is completely anti-Western. Not only that, the other areas, like for example, the appointment of staff, like diplomatic staff, has been very biased, and also I believe that nepotism has seeped into that area. So these are the factors which are preventing Sri Lanka from doing something productive in the with the international community. The international community, I don't believe, is out to get the blood seek blood from the Sri Lankan government. The international community is out for transparency and accountability. This is not a very difficult thing to attain. Now, I can understand, for example, during the first few years, due to the war, the 30-year war, during the first couple of months, Sri Lanka going off the track. But now it has been over 4 years, and now it's about time Sri Lanka did something more productive and shown some kind of shown a sensible approach to conducting relations with other countries. If that is not done, I think Sri Lanka is also going to go down the drain and go towards an extreme end, which I don't think is very productive. This policy of taking sides is a very counterproductive policy, and not only that, it's thoroughly immature. Overall, I think Sri Lanka should change its foreign policy towards a more mature outlook. At the same time, I can say that from my experience, I can say that since 1977, for example, Sri Lanka's foreign diplomats who have been in Washington D.C. have been more towards political appointees, not the people who should be there, not the people who are capable of handling issues in a diplomatic manner. Of course, we have had people like Jayanta Dhanapala, there's no doubt about that. And also there have been a number of others, who have been in the support staff. But at the moment, I don't think we do have that kind of capability. And also, when you compare with when you have to deal with the U.S. government, there should be some very efficient people. It's much better if some diplomats are sent. And in fact, we have some, I think, young diplomats who deserve to be sent to a post like Washington D.C., which is a very important post, I think. But unfortunately, due to politics, they have not been given that opportunity. And that brings frustration in probably the Ministry of External Affairs. So this is not only the policy, it's the execution as well, which is not right, and which sort of has deteriorated.
What are your thoughts about the performance of the Sri Lankan Minister of External Affairs, Professor G.L. Peris, in navigating the Sri Lankan foreign policy?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, I don't like to be personal, but I'm not being personal. But I think I have a very high regard towards the present minister's intellectual capacities. He's certainly an academic, brilliant academic, but I'm not exactly sure whether he has performed well as a minister, mainly because of his involvement in politics. I think his standards have changed. Earlier, a lot of people had confidence in him, and a lot of people thought that he's a person who can bring some liberal standard to the foreign policy establishment. But now, when you look at it, when you go back and look, Mr. J.L. Peris has been in every government, I think, since the 90s. He has managed to manipulate himself and get into the different governments. But has he brought any uh, results? That's what we have to ask. I don't think, earlier, I believe he was the Minister of Trade or something like that. Now, either as the Minister of Trade or as the Minister of External Affairs now, I don't think he has given the country what the country deserves. Now, for example, he lost in Geneva twice, and any other foreign minister in a developed country would have resigned. But Professor Paris has not resigned, and also I personally believe that he should go to his field, which is law. He will, I believe, he will make a good Minister of Justice, but not a Minister of External Affairs, because he has not had the exposure to the mechanisms of world diplomacy. Now, people like, when you look back, like people like, say, Lalit Tatulatmurli or Lakshman Kadragama, they have had both the exposure overseas as well as locally. So that's the type of person who should be brought in, I think, to handle an important position like Minister of External Affairs. But I'm not saying that Professor Pires is not a intelligent person. He is definitely an intelligent person, but he has not performed. He has not been very productive in his field. That's something I can say.
In your view, are there any missed opportunities in the post-war Sri Lanka to build international credibility?
There are many. There are many. Sri Lanka, when Sri Lanka won the war in 2009, Sri Lanka had a huge window of opportunity. But unfortunately, Sri Lanka blew it up. The way it happened was this. When Sri Lanka should have more magnanimous towards the vanquished and started a discussion with the minorities to bring about some kind of reconciliation, Sri Lanka failed, unfortunately. Sri Lanka didn't focus on it. Instead, Sri Lanka started focusing on petty politics. One thing I can say is that now, for example, as most of us are aware, the imprisonment of the former army general, that was not an issue we should have focused on at that point. Sri Lanka should have focused on things like bringing discipline towards the unruly cabinet members. As most of us are aware, now actually I have been in Sri Lanka. I was in Sri Lanka during the elections. I have been in Sri Lanka during the hearings related to General Fonseca. There have been a number of very unruly cabinet members who have brought down the standard of the country. We should have started disciplining them first. Then we should have focused on other factors. Now, and also we should have opened up an intelligent dialogue with the minority communities, which we did not do. We started celebrating. Sri Lanka started celebrating in a manner which Sri Lanka should not have. Of course, one can understand, victory lap, one can always understand. But it's always good to give your opponent an opportunity, to say, okay, fine, let's forget about it, let's get along, and start doing something more productive. That's not what happened. Now, I know for sure, because now I happen to be in Sri Lanka, And I have traveled to Jaffna a couple of times. Once was immediately after the war, after the end of the war, rather. Now, I was in Jaffna, and actually I went with another friend of mine who had been with the World Bank and who's now retired to Sri Lanka. And the two of us managed to get in a place to stay, which was the former army general's quarters. And now they had, by that time, they had converted it to a hotel by the name of Tal Sevana or something like that. Now, to go to Tal Sevana, one had to go through a high security zone. Now, the moment we entered the high security zone and the moment we saw the damage done to beautiful houses, mansions, with blood marks, we started feeling very, very depressed. Now, just imagine now if you own a house, and if, say, I try to come and occupy that house, you would feel very bad about it. It's the same thing, like when this was not just one house, but several houses. Approximately about 2-3 miles we went, with all these houses being sort of shut down. It was like a neglected, rundown city, ghost city. But anyway, that type of thing we should not have done. And in fact, now say, at the same time, we have Sri Lanka has done a lot of mistakes in the sense closing down some of the, wiping off some of the historical sites. Now this war, whether Sri Lanka won or lost, there are some things which you have to preserve, but those things are not. So this type of petty-mindedness has taken the focus from where the focus should have been to something else. So this has made the foreign policy, then the credibility issues to be affected. Now, also, now Sri Lanka has spent on trying to spin or to clean its act by hiring some PR firms. Like one is Patent Box. Now, Patent Box is a very respected firm in Washington, D.C. But I know the person who's dealing the Sri Lankan issue. That's a very raw, very young person who's not capable of handling an issue like that. So, technically, it's the expatriates who are living here who have a better understanding of what's happening in this part of the world. So they should be given an opportunity. Now, say when an ambassador comes or when a new person is sent, it takes a little time for them to settle. And then they go for things like gimmicks. But these are not the things. Now very recently, for example, talking about gimmicks, Sri Lankan embassy had taken a shipload of Sri Lankans to Sri Lanka. In fact, they called me too. They tried to contact me too, but I was not willing to go. Now, took a plane load to the new airport in Sri Lanka. I don't see any point in that. That's not the way to win the sympathy of the people in this country. Now, or in the Western world, or for that matter, any part of the world. Now, rather than going and spending Sri Lankan funds, the funds Sri Lanka has to develop Sri Lanka. Earlier, I remember, like when we had the Association for Peace in Sri Lanka, I was the CFO, and I know that funds were collected from people living in this part of the world, like or from Australia or from England or wherever they live, they would make contributions. And that did not cost Sri Lanka money. But now Sri Lanka is spending, but Sri Lanka is not getting the results. If Sri Lanka is getting the results, that's fine, But I don't think Sri Lanka is getting the results of those investments. So overall, I can say that Sri Lanka has lost a lot of opportunity to missed a lot of opportunities by focusing on wrong priorities. The priority should have been to develop a coherent foreign policy and execute it in an intelligent manner.
That concludes our news edition. We meet you again with another news edition of News, Views and Entertainment from Boston and USA. Till then, goodbye.